We did it. We got to the end of season 1 of X-Men 97. Man, it was a jam-packed season, but we're going to be discussing everything about this fantastic thing right here on This Comic Cooks. I am your host, Vactor. I'm here with the two greatest co-hosts in the world, Gold Team Leader Shoff. How are you doing today?
People are good. Too damn good.
Oh, man. Shoff Bastion. He's in the building. And we have Blue Team Leader Tim Costello. Super Tim, how are you doing, sir?
Sinister, all I do is think.
Whoa! That is a quote from X-Men 97, the last episode from season 1, and that's what we're going to be talking about today here on This Comic Cooks. We are glad you are here to join us, and we're glad to talk X-Men 97. Man, boys, Bo DeMeo did it, and the rest of the staff at X-Men 97. I got to give my virtual hats off to them because they did a fantastic job this season. And earlier in This Comic Cooks, I had an episode about the MCU, and I said the thing that could bring people back was Fantastic Four and X-Men. Now, I didn't know X-Men 97 was going to be cooking as much as it was, but as far as like the conversation around it, like I've seen nothing but positivity about people talking online, hey, more of this. I want more. Going to that Airbnb of the X Mansion. So this has been a fantastic thing for the MCU overall. I'm very happy that we've gotten this. Let's go to Gold Team Leader, Shoff Astion. Shoff, what did you think about this finale, the third part of Tolerance is Extinction?
I loved it. I mean, it just continued the trend. We haven't had a single episode that felt like filler. We haven't had a single episode that felt like a downer or that lost the quality. Everything has been on this uptick, which is kind of crazy because I think I even saw a meme. Somebody was saying like, how come every episode is the best episode?
It's a good problem to have.
So I mean, but and a lot of shows like they'll be great, and then the season finale that doesn't stick the landing. Something is not right. But not only do they complete the story that they wanted to tell, but they begin another one that is also extremely epic and makes me so excited for season 2. So I loved it.
Man, I cannot wait for season 2. Tim, can you wait for season 2? You're going to have to. It might just be the end of this year from what I'm hearing. We might be getting season 2, but what'd you think about season 1?
I'm going to have to wait for season 2. I don't want to, but I'm going to have to. But I really loved season 1, and this episode really just, like what Shoff said, continued the trend of this season that has been just every episode is just cooking. It's on fire. They did some really fantastic things. I just can't wait to dive in. Like the whole Bastion arc was satisfactorily wrapped up. The arc with Magneto was satisfactorily wrapped up. Even every character was given a focus got their wrap up here in this episode. And going into season 2, I'm really looking forward to what they do with all of these characters.
Let's start off with Magneto because he was the previously on X-Men. It was Magneto's voice. So Tim just said he was really satisfied with this, the way it wrapped up. Shoff, how did you think they handled Magneto in this finale, this last episode?
Well, it was super awesome that we got to spend some time in that mental space that they were occupying, him and Xavier, to sort of in a familiar place, this bar where they would get drinks when they were younger men. It was excellent. It was excellent. My one thing was we were heading towards Onslaught, and I do believe that this episode furthered that likelihood a lot because we got that one scene where Xavier is like just basically like forcing him to reset the Earth and reset the electromagnetic spectrum or whatever you want to call it. And that is necessary because that's part of the Onslaught formation. And also, if they follow the comics well enough, then there is a period of time before Onslaught arrives. It wasn't just like, oh, he's here. So
Right.
I'm glad that they're going to take that time, but the show had some crazy pacing. So I was like, maybe he's just going to pop up. I mean, maybe they're not going to wait, right? Like
100%.
they were going from like crazy like Goblin Queen storyline to like whatever, like they were like breakneck speeds. So I was like, it could happen. But we didn't see anything. But I do believe that in season 2 we'll get more and more like breadcrumbs leading towards that. For that. But yeah, I thought the whole Magneto Xavier bit was a perfect linchpin within the episode to sort of like continue that all the way through. It was great.
Yeah, and it even goes back to the opening, the intro that we've seen every week of the Magneto side, the Xavier side running
Yeah.
and butting heads. That could be the whole theme for this show in general. It's kind of like the two ideologies of these men butting heads against each other. And in the 90s, they always like to say it was Malcolm X versus Martin Luther King. That philosophy of going against like the nonviolent versus the violent. Like we have the two sides of the coin. They both want the same thing, but they're willing to go to different lengths. And it's interesting to see, as we saw in the last episode, the different X-Men who are willing to cross that line and to go over to Magneto's side. We saw it with Rogue in this episode, and at the end, did you guys think it was a little too wrapped up in a bow where everybody was like, oh, okay, we're all back and we're all friends again, and Rogue's back on the team and everybody's back together, Sunspot and Jubilee.
Yeah, like I think now we're talking about, Rogue being on Magneto's side. I felt like it seemed like she was back on the X-Men side a little bit too quickly. I would have liked to, spend some. I mean, obviously, this episode was 40 minutes long and longer than any episode this season. But I would have liked to, like see where, because all of a sudden she's helping Magneto and Xavier, be all snug in the jet while they're in each other's brains, and then she fights Bastion on their side. So yeah, I would have liked, maybe it just seemed like she's now back on the team again. So it'll be interesting that, in season 2, where she is now, which we'll talk about later, will they be willing to trust her because of what she did?
Yeah.
And I
mean, the idea is like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right? And nothing like conflict to bring people together. So when they have a shared villain in Bastion that they need to unite together against, I think that you kind of like have to let your issues with someone sort of fall by the wayside for at least a bit. But yeah, she probably will pick back up and have some animosity towards the team, or they may have some towards her, some resentment over her decisions and things like that. I saw a funny meme that the story of X-Men in its entirety is really just the story of a breakup between two men and everyone else getting stuck in the middle of it. It's just like Xavier and Magneto can't find common ground, and then everyone else has to suffer for it.
Well, that's Civil War
that's
right
accurate.
there.
That is no lies detected in that meme. I think that is very interesting. Like I said, just their two philosophies and them butting heads, but also the fact that they're not just straight up antagonists. And that's the thing about the way that the X-Men have evolved from the beginning. Like Magneto was a mustache twirling villain at the beginning. In the 60s, it was like, all right, he's just a bad guy. He just wants to take over the world or whatever. And over the course of, I think, especially with Chris Claremont, like the different writers that have come in after Stan Lee and kind of put their take on it. Now Magneto has become a lot of people's like, oh, Magneto was right. I can understand his point of view. It's more shades of gray than black and white. So that's what I like, that evolution to the modern take on this. And we've seen it even in the live action in the Magneto and Xavier's kind of interactions between the two, where they are friends, they're brothers, and Fassbender did a great job with Magneto. And there was a great Easter egg with all the different Magneto actors when they had that little file on Magneto. I did not catch it at first because it goes by pretty quick and it's like pretty small, so you got to zoom in on it. But it has the names crossed out of the last names of Ian McKellen, Michael Fassbender, and then the original Magneto voice actor, I think, who passed away from the '90s show. His name is on there too, and
But it is
that's
not
just
crossed out.
Oh, it's the full name?
Yeah, David
Oh,
Hamlin's
okay.
name is not crossed
Nice,
out,
nice. Okay.
but which
Yeah.
I thought was an interesting touch. But
Mm.
yeah, Magneto, like this season has been such a huge one for Magneto because we're building off of everything not only that we've seen in the animated series, which people may or may not have seen, you know, watching the show, but we're also building on the things we've seen in the movies and based on what people know and seeing Magneto's conflict. I really liked that scene with them in the bar because they've been talking about this, fairly regularly all season. Magneto talks about it in Remember It, and he talks about when he came to him in the bar and told him his dream, and so to see that scene kind of play out a little bit was really cool. I really liked Magneto's line where he says, "Well, what if I was a mutant? What if you were a mutant?" And Magneto has this great line that says, "Run, hide before they start dreaming of camps," which
Mm.
is from his experience, being a Holocaust survivor, and is race relations and queer relations. It's just all over. So yeah, I really like that line. And Xavier saying you don't need to let your experiences lead to your actions. You can let them go. You can
Yeah.
forgive and move on. And that's been Xavier's mantra in every film, in every show, what have you.
Yeah. I love that. I love
Bless you.
that the Xavier is not going to give up on Magneto. It's like no matter what, even Magneto can remove the metal from Wolverine's bones, severely handicap one of Xavier's students, but he's still there. He's still like, I'm not giving up on you. Everyone else, I think, has given up on Magneto. They're like, no, he's a bad guy now.
Yeah.
Let's don't help him. But Xavier's like, nah, he's my brother. He even calls him that. Like, and Magneto's like, you're not my family. So I like that he won't give up on him. He's the eternal optimist for the
I
most
love
part. So I
he
really like
still
that.
has this nickname that he gives Magneto in the series. He still calls him Magnus because at the start of the series that was his name. It was just Magnus. I think at the time it was Eric Magnus. And in like I think near the end of the fourth season, they called him Eric Magnus Lencher because at that point he had that name. And I really love that they kind of, even though they had that, they didn't just have him say Eric, Eric, Eric. Xavier still calls him Magnus, and it reminds me, when you talk about that Xavier never gives up on Magneto, it reminded me of the Clark Kent and Lex Luthor dynamic from Smallville,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
how even though Lex has killed his father and done all these bad things in that series, even in the finale, Clark Kent is still, I'll never stop trying to save you. There's nothing lost that can be found again. I'm sorry for what happened to you and everything.
right.
So yeah, I really
Yeah,
love that dynamic that we got here.
man. Shoff, did you love the 90s Marvel cameos that we got in this episode? Did you love it, Shoff?
Yeah, that was unexpected. I mean, I guess I should have expected it to happen, but in the sheer volume that we saw, that was crazy.
Especially after
I mean,
last
let's
week.
run down who we saw. So we saw Iron Man. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So we saw Iron Man. We've seen Captain America before in the season, but we got to see him again, hanging out with President Kelly. And then we see Cloak and Dagger at one point, which was an awesome get. That was really fun.
Yeah.
Underrated. I think Cloak and Dagger are a really fun duo, and I'm glad we got to see them in this form. We got to see Daredevil. We got to see some of Alpha Flight.
Doctor Strange.
Oh yeah, Doctor Strange. He was performing surgery and doing like that was really cool. Gosh, who else did we see? We saw Omega Red, as well as
Silver Samurai.
Yeah, Silver Samurai.
Crimson Dynamo.
Crimson Dynamo. That was one I couldn't put my finger on, but yeah, you're right. That's who that was. Gosh.
Peter Parker and Mary Jane from the animated series.
Watching footage. To me, that was a little bit weird. With everything happening in the city, like the Sentinels and everything, he's just Peter Parker in that part. Like, it was great to see him, but I was like, why aren't you out there helping?
Also, Flash Thompson is right behind him too.
That was a fun cameo. I wonder if either he had just got done being Spider-Man or he was about to go into Spider-Man. If you look in the corner, there is a little web on the window. So I don't know if he was there before or if he was about to go out and go do some more stuff. But that was the one thing I got spoiled. I was on Twitter, and then the very first thing that popped up for me was, we got him. Peter found MJ, and I was like, I haven't seen the episode yet. It was somebody who had watched it at midnight.
Oh yeah,
and,
that's a good point
tweeted.
because the way the show leaves off, MJ's off in like Spider-Verse somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, she's
that was
at
the
the
ending
end-
of that 90s
the
animated
ending-
show.
Good point.
At the end of the series, she's like, because how they kind of in season 3, I've seen the show multiple times. Season 3, she gets sucked into like this portal device because that's how they're getting around the whole Gwen Stacy thing, because it's supposed to be an homage to that. And so and then she came back, but then she was a clone of Hydra Man, and yeah, this happened. And then they had Secret Wars and Spider Wars and things like that. And then at the end, it's like, I'm going to go find Mary Jane. And the show just ends. But then years later,
that's right. Okay.
they came out with this fan thing where Peter did find Mary Jane. And it's actually called Peter Finds MJ. So it's nice that they're like kind of following up on that. So I really enjoyed that.
And it just made it feel like a connected
Yeah.
animated MCU, that all of those shows are existing at the same time.
Yeah. And Doctor Strange was actually in that Spider-Man animated series. And he looked just like
I
that.
think Daredevil
Black
makes a
Panther.
cameo.
We saw Black Panther a few times.
And and they called him out by name. That is T'Chaka.
T'Chaka,
instead of T'Challa. So I wonder if going forward there might be something next season where T'Challa, we get something, but I don't know exactly what's coming down the line. But yeah, Black Panther had a nice one. And if you notice, the Dora Milaje are in that shot. And I was watching the Screen Crush breakdown, and they said at the time that in the 90s, the Dora Milaje didn't exist. That was created for the MCU. I mean, right before the MCU, the Dora Milaje was added. And so this is kind of a call out to the MCU version of Black Panther to have those two kind of combined together. So I did like that. But yeah, the cameos were off the chain, and this one, Shoff, they were fantastic. And Tim specifically tweeted, or he texted me and said, the cameos. So I had to give a shout out to that one.
The cameos were great. Like at one point I thought that, because we saw Cloak and Dagger, I at one point, because for some reason Dagger looked like Silver Sable, and I thought they got Silver Sable too. And Silver Sable being a mercenary from the comics, and featured predominantly in Spider-Man. In fact, Mara Furlan of Babylon 5 and Lost fame voiced her in the Spider-Man animated series. So,
nice.
And so, so I thought it was Silver Sable, but it was just Dagger. So,
also, the last cameo that I wanted to say, Shoff, when you were talking about the Alpha Flight, when we saw Puck in the background, in the foreground, Psylocke, who was in the 90s animated series, but always one of my favorite X-Men growing up. And
for a lot of reasons, I'm sure.
I did.
We know Shoff's reasons.
Well, I think I might have been Shoff's friend in the 90s. This is a story I haven't told either of you. So in the 90s, Psylocke was my best friend at the time. This is in 6th grade. My best friend's
his best friend
favorite
was Psylocke.
Well, that would have been cool. It was his favorite character. We would play superheroes and pick, like, okay, I'm Spider-Man, you're Wolverine, and then you're Psylocke. That would be our things, and we would pretend we were fighting with powers and stuff. Like, similar to Shoff's wrestling adventures with his brother. That'll be for another podcast. But anyways, so Psylocke was his favorite character, and he kind of introduced me to Psylocke because I didn't know who she was at the time. And then I kind of fell in love with her and the art design. And then one day at a comic convention, there was a guy selling a topless photo of Psylocke. And I said, I would like to have that. And I asked my mom, and she bought it for me. I was surprised. I was in 6th grade, and she bought a topless Psylocke photo for me. And I still have that photo to this day, but it was a fantastic piece of art, and I love it. You want me to debut?
Do we get to see that on This Comic Cooks After Dark?
No, we won't be seeing that, but we want to keep our monetization on this one, Shoff. But I did want to tell that story. That was
I won't be able to think of anything else the rest of the day. You better go digging in your closet, and you better find that.
I'll send that to Shoff.
Yeah,
and
you send me a little. You slide into my DMs with that. I want to see that.
Yes, but I also did want to talk about the Phoenix somebody put on Twitter online, they're like, is this a Phoenix ex machina? Like they felt like the Phoenix and then Magneto coming back at the very end were kind of a little too convenient. So I wanted to ask both of you if you thought that the Phoenix coming out, doing her thing, and then just leaving, was that a little bit too much of like a convenient thing? Do you think they should have seeded it? Even though the only way they've been seeding it this whole season was in the intros. Like they kept on showing the Phoenix over
Yeah.
and over and over again. So I was like, okay, where's the Phoenix? And then we didn't get it until this episode. But did you feel like that was enough, I guess, of foreshadowing of the Phoenix, or do you think they should have had it a little bit more throughout the season? I'll ask Shaw first.
I didn't have an issue with it because it's become part of Jean Grey's identity, in my personal opinion. So it's kind of hard to separate the Phoenix from her, even if she's not technically merged with that entity at this
Right.
moment. I like to think of it more like she probably has some residual,
Yes,
like Phoenix
Right.
Yeah.
energy within her,
Mhm, mhm.
and that when in these times of distress where she's like near death or whatever, like the Phoenix can help her in those moments and she can be reborn or whatever, to do, and that's essentially what happened. So I didn't have an issue with it at all. It didn't bother me. In fact, I was like, oh, it's a convenient plot device, but it makes sense for her character, so I didn't have a problem with it.
Tim, did you think it was a little too convenient, or were you okay
At the
with it?
time, I think when it just like shows up and the Phoenix just shows up, and I'm like, and she's not like in Phoenix garb or anything. She's kind of like enveloped in light. At the time, like,
Flame.
yeah, and I was just like, I don't know. It just felt like, because I mean, the question is always, well, if this can happen anytime, why doesn't it happen all the time? And I don't think it needs to happen all the time because, like Shoff said,
Right.
I thought that it was just, like it's kind of a residual thing. They have been seeding it all season through the intro, and if we've learned anything from this show, and they definitely took their cues from WandaVision with the intros, is in that every intro is important and is also telling a story and giving you these clues. Hey, this is what's going to happen in the story. Keep your eyes open. And they've had the Phoenix thing all the whole time, and you could argue that, well, maybe that's just because it was like such a huge part of the original show. But I like the explanation they gave after it happened. Like after it happened, I'm like, well, that was convenient. But the way they explain is that it lives inside of her and manifested so that she could protect her son.
Right. Well, I think at some point Cable says like, you underestimate my mom or something. Like I feel like he embraced that Jean and Madeline are one now, and
Yeah.
that okay, that's my mom. But what would have I like what you said about her, the Phoenix coming out to protect her son. That to me would have been a more clear line of, if Cable was in danger, then the Phoenix comes out. I felt like it was like, well, wait a minute, Cable shot her and put her in danger, and then the Phoenix came out. So if they would have reversed it, like maybe Sinister, is under her, puts her under a spell, and then she's about to kill Cable, and then the Phoenix comes out. Something like that would have been a little bit, would have made more sense to me, I guess. That would have been a nice little through line.
Yeah.
But you know what I loved that came out of that was after the Phoenix disassembled Sinister's DNA, his mutant DNA, and he was like, "Oh, I'm hideous," like the Wicked Witch of the of X-Men, and then Morph turning into Sinister to show him
I
looks the
loved
same to
Morph.
me.
I loved Morph basically
That was
rubbing it in
fantastic.
Sinister's face. I really loved that because of their history and how Sinister had tortured Morph all that time. He finally gets to have one up, just have one on Sinister. Like screw you, buddy. And so I really
Yeah.
like that he like rubbed it in his face. Like that was the icing of the cake
Yes.
for me.
What did you think about the way they handled Bastion in this last episode? His power set, his plan, and then how he ultimately went out. What did you think?
Sure. If there is one, if I would call it a gripe, I don't even know if I would call it a gripe, but if there's one thing I felt like the show didn't do a solid enough job of, it's truly explaining what Bastion's plan was.
Hmm.
Because it's to me, and I mean, I watched all the episodes. Some of them I watched twice.
It is a
I
little
don't
hazy.
really feel like I have a solid understanding of what his end game was. I mean, yeah, he had the Prime Sentinels, but they had been turned off, turned back on, turned off again. Like, it was, if that was his end goal, that that was already sort of like, figured out and taken care of. It just felt wishy-washy to me. That's the only thing, is I felt like his motivations, his intent, his end game, it wasn't super clear. He was a formidable villain, absolutely. And I liked that they realized they weren't going to be able to take him down by sheer force. It was going to require that appealing to his humanity and such. And so I think that was a really nice touch, because some villains, it's not about, how big is your stick. So, ooh.
yeah, that's yeah. Yes, Shoff.
But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed Bastion. I think the best aspect of Bastion was his dialogue is written so well.
And Theo James.
Yeah. And Theo James's voice acting was top notch. So his voice acting combined with some really beautiful like soliloquies and monologues.
Yeah.
I mean, he's almost Shakespearean in terms of like villain. The way he approaches like how he speaks. It was a full-on Greek tragedy happening in front of us. I was like, it was awesome. So
yes, I'm 100% with you. And I think, to my understanding, and maybe Tim, you have a different understanding, Bastion's end game, or his plan, was what Master Mold's was in the original. And he's kind of a merging of Master Mold and Nimrod. And Master Mold's plan was, okay, we're going to replace everybody's brain with robots. Like, every human on Earth is going to turn into a machine. And that was kind of a little bit of the Sentinel Prime stuff. But then I think, to go even further beyond that, because I was confused also, Shoff. I was like, is he on the mutant side or is he on the human side? And I think neither. I think he's on the machine side. That's been his power from the beginning. Like, he can hear machines, he can talk to machines. And so I feel like he feels like he's a machine. He's Master Mold, he's Nimrod, and he doesn't care about mutants, even though he is a mutant. He doesn't care about humans. He just cares about technology. That was my understanding. Tim, what did you think his overall plan was for Bastion?
Bastion is this season has been a very interesting character in that he is a mutant of sorts, but he's also a mutant who hates his own kind. Because his mother was very anti-mutant, and it's like, and it was really brought home to me because I have ADHD. So Bastion in this episode really felt like a metaphor for neurodivergence. And especially this line that I really loved from him. When Storm's talking to him, he says, "I didn't ask for this either, to be born with this programming, this destiny inside me, the urges." Because because he is born with the minds of Master Mold and Nimrod in his brain, he's like, I must kill all mutants, I must kill all humans, I must kill everybody. And to live with that and to grow up with that, it very much seemed like a metaphor for neurodivergence, and also for homosexuality as well, or any other kind of opposite of heterosexuality. And that's been X-Men's huge thing from the get-go. And so I really liked that. And to me, his plan made sense in that, his mother hated mutants. And, and they did appeal to his humanity, like, this is because of your mother, and you don't have to do this. She lied to you. And that's always a hard thing for a child to come to grips with, that their parents were not, that the person's parents are not perfect. And that's something, that as we grow older, we learn to deal with, and it's something Bastion never dealt with. And so, and he's like, well, I'm just going to kill the whole lot of you, and I don't care. So it made sense to me. He was a formidable villain, like Shoff said, and I really loved that. As the episode progressed, his humanity was visually shedding. Like, as the episode progresses, you see more of his machine side it's almost like a Darth Vader thing. He's more machine now than man.
Yeah. The one line I didn't like that they kept saying over and over whenever he would appear, they go, "He's the future incarnate." And then like somebody else later would say, "He really is the future incarnate." It's like, come on. You can't
Like he's
both have the
Elvis or
same
something.
thought of the combination of words that no one else has ever uttered in the history of mankind. He's the future incarnate. Oh
Right.
my gosh.
Which the X-Men were always supposed to be like, even going back to the original, it was like they are the future that humanity fears. Like, oh, they're what humanity is going to turn into, what they're
Yeah.
going to evolve into. So fear the future, fight the future. All those themes are running in the background. But also, Tim, that point about parentage, parenthood, that also struck a chord with me. And I think all of us are fathers now versus when the original show came out, we were not fathers.
I think I
Thank
am.
goodness.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I better
This
check.
hits. Yeah, go check on your children, Tim. Do you know where your kids are? This hits differently with the Bastion stuff, with his mom when he was holding his mom crying, and with the Cable, Jean, and Cyclops, where he's saying goodbye. Well, Cyclops is saying goodbye to Cable,
Oh yeah.
and Cable kind of coming around to, I always heard stories about how great my parents are, and you guys didn't do it justice, or like, you surpassed my expectations. Like that whole scene in that cafe or wherever they were at, that was fantastic. And um Cyclops saying, I promised myself I would not be my father. Like my dad
Love that.
treated me bad and he left me. I'm not gonna do that to you. Almost the Alan Grant Jurassic Park. That's not what I'm gonna do. Like that hits me deep. That even though
Yeah.
I I can't necessarily relate to that because I had a great father. Me and my father have a great relationship. But if I was in that situation, like I'm putting myself in Cyclops' shoes, if my dad was a bad dad, and yes, I would not 100%, I would not want to be my father. I'd want to specifically go out of my way to make sure I'm a great parent to my son. So that was just a great, this whole season between Cable and Cyclops. I've really loved their
Yeah,
relationship.
and it reminded me of in episode 3 when he said, "I am not going to be my father." When when
Yes.
presented with the option of, we're going to send Nathan to the future, I'm not going to be my father. I'm not going to leave him. And he said, "I
Yes.
promised I wouldn't become my father, and you will see me for who I am." And he takes off his optic visor and reveals his eyes. That was great because it's
That was
something that Jean
a
could
much
do.
better scene than the live action X-Men 3 when
Oh, let's
Famke
not talk
Janssen
about
takes
that.
the visor off and you could see his eyes. This was a far better version of that.
Yeah.
I love this one, the way that they did this.
The less
Anything
said about
with
that, the better.
parentage, Shoff, that kind of resonated with you in this episode?
I don't want to talk about it. I mean, sure. Everything that Tim said makes perfect sense. I think the concept of racism is a learned behavior. It's not something we're born with, and so for his programming that he's talking about, that absolutely, like when you as a child are fed this narrative that these type of people are bad, or you shouldn't like these kind of people, then you grow up with that programming, and that's what you believe. And so, like, absolutely, exactly what Tim is saying, exactly what the story is sharing. And that's why generation after generation we are breaking the cycle, breaking the wheel of things that afflict us in that way, the hatred towards other people, other ideologies, other orientations, all that stuff, because that idea of not just racism but bigotry in every form, hatred in every form, like every generation we get further and further from that being a problem. And I look forward to when we're done with all that would be amazing.
Yeah,
that's the utopia I look forward to.
I wish. Yeah. Tim and I actually had a Star Wars conversation. If you haven't checked it out, over on our Star Wars channel, Trust in the Force, we talked about Disney taking over Star Wars. And I thought at this point in 2024, we were beyond racism, bigotry, all these things of fearing something that you don't like change or something that's different from you, and you showing hatred towards it instead of, oh, okay, that's different. That's just something not in my wheelhouse, that's not in my up my alley, but let me go over here and talk about things that I like. People are choosing to focus on things they hate in Star Wars. I think it's the same, and I love that X-Men is that allegory and that ideal that we strive for. So
Right.
Shoff, I'm 100% with you on that one. Um, I wanted to point out I loved the there's no name for it, but when Cyclops on the ship at the end, or on asteroid M at the end, and he's getting upset and he's like, I'm gonna unleash everything on Bastion, and he's gonna sacrifice himself. Like that's what you would have done, Gene. But he shoots out a wide beam from his visor, and that 100% reminded me of the Marvel versus Capcom X-Men games, where that was
Yeah.
like his special move, his final, like his biggest attack was this huge blast. I was like, yeah, this is like, it feels like the video game. Jubilee too. If she was like, game over,
Yeah,
Slamo,
which
or
was
whatever she said.
foreshadowed early on in the
Oh
season.
yeah,
that part, yeah, that reminded
Sleazoid
me
or whatever she
of
says.
the video games. That just made me feel good. So that was just a little thing that I loved, boys. Shoff, I know you always take copious notes. Did you have any other specifics that you wanted to cover?
Well, truth be told, I actually didn't take any notes this time.
Dang.
I
But
don't
I
normally. I
did.
do. You're right. Normally, you're right. I do. But the only reason why I didn't, because I didn't get a chance to watch it a second time, and I first watched it at like 5 a.m. and I was just like, I'm not taking notes right now. But what I will say is we need to touch on where the show ends.
Oh yeah,
because there are definitive groupings.
Yes.
Before we do that,
and
though,
definitive time. What's
before
that?
we do that, though, you know who
Okay.
wasn't in this episode a lot? Wolverine.
Yes,
Especially considering his ending. I mean, yeah, we haven't had a lot of him this season, but given his cliffhanger, I thought we would have like gotten a definitive. This is where Wolverine is going to be going in the next season with.
I thought that too.
The bone claws and the loss of the adamantium, but he was pretty much on the bed the entire time. Were you guys disappointed in that?
No.
Oh, the only thing I was disappointed in was I thought they would hint a little bit, and they might not be going in this direction. I don't know, but in the comics, once his metal is taken off his bones, it makes his healing factor go into overdrive, and that causes him to kind of revert to almost like a feral state. He's like an animalistic Wolverine. I thought they would maybe hint towards that a little bit. They didn't. Like you said, he's basically in the bed the whole time. I think he has one line. He says Gene in this whole episode. But I did like the morph interaction between him and them. Like morph, she can't say it, but I will. And that he cares about Logan that much that he would, I know. And Cyclops too. That scene was really good where Wolverine's on the bed and Cyclops is like, all right, Jean is the only one that can bring him back. He's like, stay with us for Jean, even though it hurts me because that's my girl. That's the girl I care about. I still,
and he knows that she loves her.
Yeah, that's in my mind because I was like, why would Cyclops say that? But in his head, I think he's like, well, what is the best for Jean?
Right.
And he knows that she cares about Logan. So that definitely had to be hard for Cyclops. And I think this whole season has been, a great character study of Cyclops and people who were down on Cyclops. Like, this is why he's cool. This is why he's a good character. He's willing to make the sacrifice play. He's willing to jump on the grenade for people. And he's also like just caring enough and a loving father. Like, all these things are great. Shoff, tell us what happened at the end of this episode.
So asteroid M, it looks like it explodes, but it doesn't. It disappears. It gets sucked into a void of some kind. It dematerializes, and we are met with Forge and surprise guest Bishop, who's back. And I think that part of the storyline takes place 6 months later, I want to say.
Yes.
Yeah, 6 months.
And we see Forge has a big like poster on the wall that he's trying to track down the missing X-Men because they have been missing since that moment when Asteroid M just blipped away. And so he's trying to find all of these missing X-Men. And there's some of them say that they're, missing. Some of them say off-world, like Scarlet Witch shows as off-world.
And Quicksilver.
It's a really cool homage to the Days of Future Past
Yes.
cover art with like all the face posters and everything with their various like deceased or whatever, which is really cool. Bishop is back with no explanation as to how he got back, which I didn't. That's the part I didn't like.
Forge,
that felt
you gotta
like a
come back
throwaway.
with me.
Right. Like I thought he was like so pivotal, and now he just shows up after it's all gone down, and it's just him and Forge. But then again, those two are a good pair. So, and if anybody's going to go track them down via various time periods, you're going to need somebody who's got access to the time stream. So you need Bishop, and Forge is often attributed with Bishop or attributed with the time travel episodes. So they're a good team to be going back and forth into the past and the future to track down these X-Men. Because we find out that other groupings have found their way to other time periods, and we see various paths converge. So we see Scott Summers and Jean Grey end up in 3960 AD or something like that. And I don't know this plot line very well, so I'm going to tag somebody else in for that. But they meet Mother Ascani, and they meet a young Nathan Summers, which is incredible. So I'll tag one of you in to take over from there.
Well, I gave Tim some homework because there was a series that came out in the 90s, right near Fatal Attractions, like right alongside this timeline of what's happening in the comics. Is Scott? What is the official title, Tim? Scott and Jean?
It's called Adventures of Cyclops and Phoenix.
Yes, which I highly recommend. That was a
pivotal.
Yes, right. And those covers, like I told you both in our side chat, they are stained in my memory. Like I have those covers etched in my brain because they were so unique and showing Cable's techno-organic side. Like all those things were just and this was around 5th grade, 6th grade at the time these were coming out. So those were pivotal things for me. But anyways, in the storyline, what happens, Mother Ascani, who is Rachel Summers, that's Scott and Jean's daughter from the Days of Future Past timeline, she pulls their consciousnesses from their bodies where they were on a honeymoon. They just got pulled to the future into these new clone bodies. And then they have to help raise Nathan, young Cable, in the future. And she, like the nature of what happened, she basically passes away. And so it's just Scott and Jean, who are slim and red in the future timeline, and they actually spend years raising Cable in the future. So that's what this is alluding to. That's what's going to happen is they're in the far future with Cable and another version of Apocalypse who has taken over at that time, an older version of Apocalypse.
A different
and Mother Ascani. Mother Ascani, voiced by Gates McFadden. Star Trek royalty. TNG, loved hearing her voice as Mother Ascani. But that's what's happening in the future. And then in the past,
I want to say something about this future.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
And you had me read this book, and it's great because not only is it really cool to see Scott and Jean basically raise Cable in the future after having to send him there. Well, it was really, really cool to me, and and I watched this episode again after reading the story, and I'm like, oh, okay. So if in season 2 we get kind of a light adaptation like they've done in this season with different storylines, a light adaptation of Cyclops and Phoenix, I'd be fine with that. Because we've got Rachel, and I don't know if it's clear how they got sent to the disparate timelines, but if it's revealed that Mother Ascani's deliberately pulled Scott and Jean to this timeline for a reason. I would be fine with that. I would like
Yeah, that
a
would
soft adaptation of this story.
yes. I think that's what we're going to get. I don't think we're going to go too deep into it. I think
Sure.
it's just going to be they're pulling certain elements
Yeah,
of it.
in fact,
But
when Cable mentions that he'd heard stories of his parents and the X-Men, and the fact that it's it's going to be Scott and Jean telling him those stories,
yes.
that's just
It's very Terminator-esque, like
yeah, it's
John
very
Connor.
Terminator. Yeah,
Yeah.
But he has no memory of like those people being his parents. So do you think it's going to follow the storyline in the sense that they're going to be assuming different identities?
Well, it's not they were assuming different identities. They like that was the people that they were. Slim and Red were the people that they were at that time, and so,
Right.
so Slim and Red had always been there. But like it mentions in the book that Mother Ascani had psionically pulled their
Mhm.
consciousnesses into these bodies.
Oh, I see. Okay,
And so
gotcha.
so Slim and so it's like consciousness time travel that we've seen in
Right.
Star Trek and things like that.
Kind of like
Sure.
even in Days of Future Past, the live action one
Yeah,
that we got
yeah.
where they're
Yeah,
pulling.
yeah. See, so
Yeah.
this is different because their entire
Mhm.
physical selves
Right.
have been moved,
Right.
and like they have this dramatic irony of being aware that Nathan is their son.
Cable.
He might
Right.
not recognize that right away, but
Right.
that then calls into question: is this an alternate future, or is this the same future?
This has
Because
to happen.
he should have memories. If
Right.
he's as an adult, he should have memories of them being there for him. So that's where I'm kind of like, okay, how does this work exactly?
Yeah, I think they can.
Is it an alternate 1985?
Yes, yes. I think they can do that. I think they can make it work with all of these different things we're saying. Either Cable was withholding information, we didn't know that he knew that, or he didn't, like you said, Shoff, maybe they take on alternate identities, they disguise themselves and help raise him, and then he's like, oh yeah, those were other people, those weren't my parents, they just told me stories of my parents. So there's ways that it can work and still match up.
Yeah.
But that is going to be a great plot line in season 2. I can already tell that's going to be a great.
And there's a line in the comic that I really loved, and that where it mentions that Jean Grey is as much as mother to Nathan in every way possible except biologically, and that was like that's really cool. Like that's really neat.
Yeah.
And if they could explore that, that's great. I would really love if this was a soft adaptation of this story.
Yeah,
and
I can't wait to see that.
It's also what Professor X wanted for them, right?
Yes,
is for them to go off on their own and raise a family, right? So like in essence, they're achieving that in a very roundabout, unique way.
Right.
But
and I don't know if they're going to spend years raising Cable like they do in the comics. It may just be they're there for a year or whatever, and then they come back.
How long is Mother Ascani going to be there? Because in the first issue of that book, she dies. And so, like, is she going to be like a huge presence in the season, or we'll just have to see?
And she kind of does an Obi-Wan Shoff, and she's like, "All right, strike me down, all right." And she comes back as a Force ghost, like her astral form is still there, but not like her physical presence. So, there's that future timeline. Then does it cut back to the past or does it go to the present? Either one. No, I'm sorry. The present is the after credits scene. That's right. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yes.
So
yeah.
Then there's the far past.
3000 BC Egypt. Now I don't know about you guys, but as soon as we got to Egypt, I'm like, we're in apocalypse territory. And then like as soon as they had, I think it was Beast and Rogue. Was that it?
Nightcrawler.
No, Professor X, Magneto.
Oh yeah, Professor X.
So basically everybody else.
Well, no, actually, because Wolverine, Morph, Jubilee,
Forge.
No,
Sunspot?
Those 3 at least are unaccounted for.
Oh,
okay,
interesting. Okay,
were they on that list? I didn't see them on that board.
I don't know, but they're not in either the future or the past storyline.
Interesting.
And when the show ends, we don't have any information as as to where they are.
Okay,
which tells me that whatever timeline they ended up in, either they're in the present still, or they're in another timeline or a time period, I should say, that is too spoilery to show.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because Storm also. Did you say Storm also?
Storm.
She was also not accounted for.
You know, I'll look it up while you guys are talking. Let me look it up.
Yeah, because Rogue
This might
is the
this might
first
be
one we
a
see.
this might be a question for your boyfriend, Vactor.
Oh, where are Logan, Morph? Actually, a lot of people have asked him about season 2, and every time he's answered, Bo DeMeo has said, I can't really speak to season 2. That's been his standard answer so far.
Okay, because I want to know like how many episodes he's like worked on in season 2, because that's my question. And I
Right.
actually did a bit of research while Shoff's looking that up. Is because I was thinking about like how much of Bo DeMeo's footprints are on this show, and I found out that he wrote the first 5 episodes. So he wrote To Me, My X-Men, all the way up to Remember It by himself. And like the last several episodes of the season, he wrote with a co-writer, and then there were a couple other episodes that weren't written by him at all. And so, and makes me believe like maybe they're going to use his outline or something
Yeah.
for the season.
Well, you know what?
Yeah.
Also, that brings up, Tim. That's a great. This is the return to the classic version of television, of having a showrunner, having a person in charge, and kind of the through line of there's an overall story outline,
Yeah.
versus the previous MCU stuff we had seen, which was we'll just make it up as we go. There won't be a showrunner. It'll just be we're improvising. It's like jazz, baby. We're making it up on the fly. And
Biodigital
we
jazz.
saw how
man.
that turned out with a lot of the MCU. Yes, we saw that turn out with a lot of them. But I loved the way this season kind of. I think we're going to go back and rewatch this season from start to finish and get nuances that we didn't have before, like knowing that Bastion was there from the beginning. All of the threads are there in the background and the ties are there. I loved the way this whole season came together. Shoff, did you find it?
Yeah. So they don't talk about Jubilee or Sunspot, but those are also 2 that we didn't find out about. But Storm, Morph, and Wolverine are missing.
Okay.
And their whereabouts could very well spoil too much of season 2's plot, which by the end we see Apocalypse in the present timeline sort of walking around Genosha, right? And he digs his hand into the dirt and he pulls out a playing card, and it's Gambit's playing card, and he's talking about so much death, right? We know that that's a great way to bring back Gambit, right? As one of the 4 horsemen. If he's one of the 4 horsemen, namely, I think Death, or I think that's who he takes on, then there's 3 other horsemen, right? And there's 3 other characters who are missing: Storm, Morph, and Wolverine. So those 3 could be the other horsemen related to his present day storyline. As far as Jubilee and Sunspot, don't know. But Beast and Rogue and Nightcrawler and Xavier and
Magneto
are all in the BC storyline, 3000 BC.
And who do they meet in 3000 BC?
Would it be awful of me if when you mentioned Sunspot, don't know, I would also tag I don't care.
Wow. That's how I feel about Jubilee.
Yeah. Like seeing Sunspot's powers
they
in this episode,
and we never see him again.
Yeah. Like seeing Sunspot's powers in this episode is like, I'm Sunspot. I'm like, right. but let's go back to Egypt.
Yeah, to me it's well, real quick, the Sunspot for me is more from the comics than from this show. They didn't give us a whole lot. He didn't embrace his powers until the end. Although I did like him saying, "My name is Sunspot," similar to like Gambit, like saying that and embracing the mutant name. I like that, that part of it. But yeah, there wasn't a whole lot for this season for Sunspot to do. But back in the past, 3000 BC, who did they meet? But in Sabanur, what looks like the young version of Apocalypse in the Marvel timeline and Marvel canon, he is the original mutant. He is the very first mutant on Earth. So that's where they are in the past. And then Shoff covered the present. So 3 different apocalypses, 3 different timelines. And so those stories are going to come together in season 2. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I love this kind of because if there's a huge big bad in X-Men, the Thanos, if you will, it's Apocalypse.
Yes,
Uh,
100%.
yeah, because we've had Age of Apocalypse, we've had Return to the Age of Apocalypse. I would love to kind of see, because the future that Scott and Jean are in is after Age of Apocalypse.
Yeah, he's
And
taken
so,
over. He's won. Like
yeah,
that's the Infinity War ending. That's the Thanos wins. Like this is Apocalypse wins.
yeah. And so I love seeing like them see like maybe them accidentally creating the villain that they know of Apocalypse. Because as soon as
Yes.
we were in Egypt, and I think it's Rogue who says, "Who are you?" And I said with the episode in Sabanur, I'm like, I knew it. I knew it.
Nice.
I like Apocalypse. I'm all for it. And seeing uh seeing that we're in the Age of Apocalypse in the future. And I actually forgot to watch the post-credit scene, even though Vactor told me about it like prior to watching the episode. So I'm sitting, having my dinner, watching Screen Crush, and watching their review, and it's like, and there was a post-credit scene. I'm like, oh shoot, I forgot to watch it. And so I go back to the episode, fast forward to the end, and so seeing Apocalypse in the wreck of Genosha, and I do agree with Shoff that Gambit's probably going to be a horseman for Apocalypse, and I like that it's specifically chosen for that reason, not like it was in X-Men Apocalypse where it was freaking random. Jeez.
Yeah.
Oscar
That shows you why that movie is such a failure, because it's like you're taking the best or the biggest X-Men villain and then that's what you're turning him into. That was just a failure of the entire movie.
Real quick, guys, I did some digging. So the other faces that are shown as available mutants on the wall of the X Mansion where Forge and Bishop are hanging out. So they're the ones that they have found that are available, are not missing, they're not off world, are Colossus, Dust, Magic, Iceman, Havoc, Exodus, Shadowcat, and Emma Frost, which is really exciting because that could be like the 2.0 team for season 2 for like a
Very
present
possible.
storyline,
Mhm.
which would be great. We saw some of
Yes.
these characters in like morph cameo form, but now we're going to get to see them potentially on like the B string team or whatever you want to say.
I think for sure Emma's going to be there because she's in the opening credits. We saw her she has like a not a main storyline, but like she's there on camera,
and she has previously led the X-Men.
Yeah.
So they could definitely go down that route.
Shadowcat would be another one. We got to get Kitty Pryde.
Absolutely, I would love.
It's not X-Men without Kitty Pryde.
Yeah,
it's not.
And then off world, we've got Scarlet Witch, which we said, and also Quicksilver. And since they're usually tied to the Avengers, it's probably some Avengers threat that they're managing. But yeah, Cable, Jubilee, Sunspot, they're all marked as AWOL on the poster. So they are absent, missing. We don't know anything about where they are right now.
Yeah, I feel like Cable and Wolverine, they leave him like, all right, Cable's arm's been ripped off and Wolverine's metal's been ripped
by
off
his own arm.
Yeah,
I was like, oh man, that's insult to injury.
I did want
you rip someone's arm off and then you beat them with it.
I did want some closure on those two. Like these guys were heavily injured, and then you just leave it there. You don't tell us what happened. So that was something that I was like, but I'm excited with this season 2. The way that they wrapped it up, everything. Like Shoff said at the very beginning, there was not a bad episode. And to me, this is my favorite show that is aired this year in 2024.
Going into Marvel TV, when Marvel Studios announced they were going to make making TV shows, I was like, great, awesome. And WandaVision let out that. But and that was basically my gold standard as far as TV. Everything else to me has been good, but not as like to that standard that WandaVision had. And because that was like appointment television every week. Like I could not miss an episode of WandaVision. Whereas, with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, I Yeah, we won't talk about that. Like it wasn't as appointment. Like that first episode was good, but it wasn't as appointment. And that progressed steadily, throughout the years. But when I heard about X-Men 97, I was like, okay, cool. I like that old show. That was good. And and then when I tuned into that first episode, I was blown away with how well done it was, how well written it was, because that's a thing for me. If it's not well written, I tune out. And how well animated it was, like the stories they were telling, all these things, all the Easter eggs, which are just icing on the cake for me. This to me is the best example of Marvel television since WandaVision, and that's just facts, according to me. um,
Tim Fact.
Tim facts. So, but yeah, like this has been a fantastic run. I'm excited for season 2. I'm also cautiously optimistic for season 2, just because of the absence of Bo DeMeo, because it's been his story that he wanted to tell. He has the created by credit for this show, and so I am excited, but I'm also a little nervous. But I think we could probably hope to get some good quality stories come season 2 time.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm hoping they do a James Gunn and bring Bo DeMeo back for season 3, because season 3 has already been greenlit. So maybe I'm holding out hope, but I'm also like Tim. I without the guy that I know was responsible for the majority of that too. Without my guy being on season 2, I don't know if it's going to be 100% as good, but I will be optimistic because there was a large cast and crew that are coming back for the second season. Shoff, any closings for this episode? For this
Bo
season?
DeMeo was right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
I feel like his influence will still be felt in season 2 because he had so many ideas going into it, and I'm sure he already shared those with the writing team. I'm sure, if anything, I could see him being brought on as like an executive producer, still having some amount of
like an executive consultant
on the show, but maybe not as a showrunner per se.
Yeah.
But season 3, I don't know how, he said he had planned out multiple seasons, right?
5,
so
he said.
Yeah, so I feel like season 2 will still feel like it's his, even if it's not his, because they had, like you said, the writers were excellent, the animators were excellent, the voice acting was excellent, everything about it, the direction of the show. So they really had a dynamite team. So even though we give most of the credit to Bo, it's not just Bo that made this possible. So as long as the majority of the team is there, I think the essence will still be there too. So,
well, we hope the essence of this show, which is you, whoever's watching or listening to this, you are the essence. You'll leave a comment down below. Let us know your thoughts on X-Men 97. We just reviewed the entire season. You can go back and watch every review that we've done here on This Comic Cooks, and we're going to continue to bring you more fantastic stuff in all the world of comic books, whether it's movies, TV shows, comic books, video games, anything comic book related. We're going to be talking here on This Comic Cooks.